welcome to Chemistry 108 Forensic Science. My name is Dr. Little and I will be your professor this semester. So we're going to begin with Chapter 1, which is sort of an introduction to what is forensics. The name of our book is Criminalistics, and we'll talk a minute about how criminalistics is one part of forensic science. And it's a great written textbook. It has a lot of things in it. My PowerPoints and lectures are going to kind of go along with it, but I'll probably point out some slightly different things. I'm going to focus on the science side of things this semester. So let's get right into it. All right, so what is forensic science? So forensic science is the application of science to the field of criminal justice. So it's science first, and it's all about how we deal with science and how we think about evidence, but we're going to apply it to laws and to the criminal justice system. So it's sort of this intersection between science and criminal justice. Things we will talk about a lot, we'll talk about in a couple chapters, physical evidence, and that's a lot of what we're focusing on. There's also statistics, there's other things along with that. Things we won't get involved in as much as is like investigative interviewing techniques or things like that. That's not involving the science so much, although it is psychology. But so that's what we mean by forensic science. So let's kind of break it up and talk about the disciplines of forensic science. Now, later on in this chapter, we're going to talk about things that a crime lab does, but I think it's helpful if we look at the American Association of Forensic Science, which is aafs.org, which is a great website, by the way. They really break it up into, I think it's 14 disciplines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 disciplines. So anthropology, criminalistics, digital and multimedia, engineering, general, jurisprudence, odontology, pathology, psychiatry, question documents, and toxicology. And one of your first assignments, I'm going to have you sort of look at a document and really dig into one of these areas and find out what specifically happens in that discipline. Criminalistics is generally the application of how to analyze physical evidence, and that's a lot of what this course will focus on. Okay, so let's start off talking a little bit about crime labs. The big key takeaway point I want to kind of bring up is that crime labs, they're not standardized, they're not organized, and they're under strain. And when I say not organized, I mean there is nothing ensuring that they will be organized. There are particular places that are. We have some different types of crime labs. So of course there's federal crime labs, FBI labs, state, the Louisiana State Police crime lab, the state crime labs, county crime labs. Of course, in Louisiana we call them parish labs. Local, like some of our cities are fairly big and have really nice sheriff's office crime labs. And then there's also private labs that do like contracting services. So we have a variety of different type, and there is no system that organizes them. There's no hierarchy. So it isn't that, that the state lab has power or over the local lab, or that the local lab can refer to the state lab for different things. Now, that doesn't mean that a good coroner might have contacts at lots of other different labs and be able to use them, and that there can be coordination, but it's not by design. So there can be a lot of different systems and different procedures in place, and a lot of things can get missed. So this is one of the issues. There has been some attempts to try to come up with an organized system, and in Europe they're trying to do that, but to date we really have sort of separate labs that operate independently. So they do offer different services, right? Not every lab does every type of analysis. There are some basic common services that most of them provide, but some of them are under different departments. So in one case, the biology department might handle DNA, and in another case, a lab might have a special DNA department. So there's not one size fits all. Most importantly, though, the crime labs are under strain by a lot of factors. So as we have had more and more court cases that have hinged upon physical evidence, and as this becomes more possible, more courts and more proceedings demand more forensics. Also, more criminal activity. as science advances and we have all these new techniques, the field of DNA analysis has just been revolutionized by this technique called PCR, and that's really changed the game. We have more evidence collected at crime scenes. As we know more about it, and the desire to have stronger cases means we're collecting more evidence, which is more to process. And of course, it all costs money, so limited government budgets put strain on this. Sometimes decisions about how forensics is handled is based off of a budgetary decision rather than a decision of justice. And these are issues that we'll get into a little bit in this course. Okay, so let's talk about, according to the book, we'll use the book's version, but again, as I say, certainly some of you may be working in criminal justice and you may have had some experience working with some of the local and state crime lab and say, well, that's not how they do it at LSP. But we're just going to use what the book says. So there are basically 5 basic services that most large labs are going to provide. A physical science unit. And so that's going to be chemistry, physics, geology, sort of like taking some physical evidence and examining it. We have a biology unit that handles things that deal with biology, anything, body samples, fluids, hairs, fibers, anything that comes from a human being probably is going to be dealt with in the biology unit unless it's nail polish or something else on it. Firearms unit, firearms and explosives. Discharge bullets, casings, ammo. Sometimes they handle the explosives too. Sometimes the explosives are handled in the physical science unit. It's kind of an overlapping area. The document unit, that's going to handle handwriting and question documents, forgeries, things like that. Photographic unit, handling photographic evidence, and more that's now including video evidence. So these are sort of a general overview of what the services are going to be providing. And one of the things for this chapter I'll ask you is sort of to tell me which unit should this be sent to for this type of evidence. That's going to be more in chapter 2 when we start talking, or chapter 3 when we talk about physical evidence. Okay, so some other services that you might see at large labs would be toxicology. That's a pretty big one. Some of them send it off to a third-party lab. Some of the big labs around here can do that, and that's examining the body, either fluids or organs, for poisons. Latent fingerprint unit, doing fingerprint analysis. Polygraph unit, doing lie detector tests. Voice print analysis, so doing audio files and trying to recover things on that basis. And in some cases, they actually have a specialized evidence collection unit that has people who can be sent to crime scenes to collect the evidence and process it to make sure that it's collected properly. There's some training that sometimes happens, and I am not familiar in the state of Louisiana with some programs that are doing this, but the idea is that all of this is going to have to be collected, this evidence on the crime scene. We'll talk about the crime scene in chapter 2. And so how do the people who are on the crime scene know what they need to do, and can they be on call 24 hours? As you know, crime never sleeps, so when it's 3 a.m. do you have people out there who can collect the evidence on a fresh crime scene? Obviously, the better the training, the better it is, because we want to have good quality evidence. If the evidence isn't collected properly or isn't collected at all, or sometimes there's time-sensitive issues about evidence, then we don't have good quality evidence, and without good quality evidence, the analysis can't be performed.